A renowned Munich criminal defense attorney who had spent his entire life defending other people in court suddenly needed a lawyer himself. But on the morning after his 10th intimate encounter with a mysterious Syrian beauty, Dr. Florian Weber was found in a condition that left even experienced emergency doctors speechless. 45-year-old Dr. Florian Weber was considered one of Munich's most brilliant criminal defense attorneys. In the courtrooms of the Bavarian capital, his name was legendary, a man who could turn even the most hopeless cases into success with his sharp rhetoric and razor-sharp intellect. His colleagues respected him, his opponents feared him, and his clients paid enormous sums for his services. But behind the flawless facade of the successful lawyer hid a man who didn't have his life under control. After his painful divorce 3 years ago, Florian had plunged into a self-destructive cycle of gambling addiction, excessive nightlife, and risky affairs with much younger women. What had begun as harmless distraction from professional stress had become a dangerous obsession. His 15-year-old daughter Sabine lived with her mother, only seeing her father every other weekend. Even then, Florian was often absent, tired from nights of partying or nervous about his next gambling debts. Guilt gnawed at him, but he couldn't break free from the vicious cycle. "Dad, you can't really talk to anyone anymore," Sabine had accused him just a few weeks earlier. "You're always so absent." These words had hit Florian, but not enough to change him. Instead, he plunged even deeper into his escapades, seeking comfort in the arms of women whose names he often forgot by the next morning. It was during one of these sleepless nights, in an exclusive Munich nightclub, that he first encountered Nadira Hassan. She sat alone at the bar, a glass of wine before her, reading, unusual enough in this loud, crowded environment, a book in Arabic. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over her shoulders. Her large brown eyes seemed thoughtful and a little sad. Florian, who had already drunk several whiskeys and felt irresistible, approached her. "Interesting reading for a nightclub," he said with his most charming smile. Nadira looked up, and their eyes met. "Sometimes you need some peace in chaos," she replied in perfect German, only with a slight accent that made her voice sound exotic and mysterious. What Florian didn't suspect at that moment, Nadira Hassan was not the vulnerable student she pretended to be. The 28-year-old Syrian had a dark past and even darker plans. Her connections reached deep into shady circles, and she had already swindled several wealthy men out of their fortunes. But Florian saw only the beautiful, intelligent woman before him, who seemed so different from the superficial party girls he normally spent his time with. He invited her for a drink, then another. They talked about literature, politics, life in Germany as a migrant. "You're not like other men," Nadira said with a smile that seemed both shy and seductive. "You really listen." These words were like balm for Florian's wounded ego. After years of being criticized by his ex-wife, of seeing his daughter look at him with disappointment, of feeling like a failure, here was finally someone who appreciated him. "I'd like to see you again," he said at the end of the evening as the club emptied. "I'd like that too," Nadira replied, and gave him her phone number. "But be careful, Herr Doctor. Sometimes you get more than you expect." Florian laughed at this mysterious warning. He was an experienced man, a successful lawyer accustomed to controlling all situations. What could go wrong? This overconfidence would become his biggest mistake. Because Nadira Hassan was not only beautiful and intelligent, she was also ruthlessly dangerous, and she had already decided that Dr. Florian Weber would become her next victim. In the coming weeks, a relationship would develop between them that would become obsessive, passionate, and ultimately deadly. 10 times they would share the most intimate closeness, 10 times Florian would believe he had found paradise. But on the morning after the 10th time, a discovery would be made that would leave even the most experienced investigators of the Munich police in incredulous silence. Dr. Florian Weber was a man of extremes. In the sacred halls of the Munich Palace of Justice, he was a legend, a lawyer who could transform even hopeless cases into spectacular victories with his brilliant rhetoric and unshakable self-confidence. But outside the courtroom, the same man was a prisoner of his own weaknesses and addictions. His law firm on Munich's Maximilianstrasse was a reflection of his professional success. Mahogany furniture, leather books, oil paintings, and a collection of crystal decanters with fine spirits characterized the office. The walls were adorned with framed newspaper articles about his most spectacular trial victories. The Devil's Advocate, a tabloid had once called him, a nickname he liked. On this Tuesday morning in September, Florian sat behind his imposing desk, preparing for one of the most important trials of his career. His client was a Munich construction entrepreneur accused of corruption and tax evasion worth millions. The case would dominate headlines for weeks, and Florian's fee would be 6 figures. "The evidence is thin," he murmured to himself while going through the files. "The prosecutor has more holes in his indictment than Swiss cheese." His secretary, Mrs. Zimmerman, a dutiful woman in her mid-50s who had worked for him for 15 years, brought him his third espresso of the day. She knew her boss well enough to notice that he looked tired, that his eyes were red and his hands trembled slightly. "Did you stay up all night again, Herr Doctor?" she asked with the familiarity of a long-term employee. Florian didn't look up from his documents. "Just went to bed a bit late. This case here demands its sacrifices." That was a half-truth. Florian had indeed worked until 4 in the morning, but not on the trial, but at the poker table of an illegal gambling round in Schwabing. He had lost 12,000 euros, money he actually needed for Sabine's school fees. Guilt gnawed at him, but he pushed it aside. After the next big win, everything would be fine again. At 11 o'clock, Dr. Jens Maurer, his longtime colleague and one of his few true friends, entered the office. The two men had known each other since university, had taken their first steps as young lawyers together. Jens was the one who watched Florian's development with growing concern. "You look like shit," Jens said without preamble as he sat in one of the leather chairs. "Good morning, Jens. Nice to see you too," Florian replied sarcastically. "I'm serious, Florian. When did you last really sleep? When did you last spend a weekend with Sabine without being distracted?" Florian took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. The mention of his daughter always hit him hard. Sabine was the only thing in his life that was really important, but at the same time she reminded him daily what a failure he was as a father. "Sabine is 15, he said defensively. "At that age, daughters don't want anything to do with their fathers anyway." "That's bullshit, and you know it," Jens countered. "She needs you, Florian, especially now, after the divorce." The divorce. Florian thought of his ex-wife Christine, a successful doctor who had tried to help him for 3 years before giving up. "You're destroying yourself," had been her last words. "And you're dragging Sabine down with you." "I have everything under control," Florian lied. Jens shook his head. "No, you don't. And you know what? That scares me. Because when a man like you loses control, it rarely ends well." These words would prove prophetic. After Jens left, Florian tried to concentrate on his work, but his thoughts wandered, drifted to yesterday evening, to the lost 12,000 euros, to Sabine's disappointed face during her last visit. He reached for the crystal decanter and poured himself a cognac, even though it was only noon. The phone rang. "Dr. Weber, this is your daughter," Mrs. Zimmerman said through the intercom. Florian's heart skipped a beat. Sabine never called the law firm unless something important had happened. "Dad?" Sabine's voice sounded small and hurt. "Mom says the money for the class trip isn't there. She says you forgot to transfer it." Florian closed his eyes. The 12,000 euros from last night would have been enough not only for the class trip, but for a whole year of school fees. "It's just a small misunderstanding, sweetheart," he lied. "I'll take care of it today. Promise?" "Promise." When he hung up, he stared at the phone for a long time. He thought about Jen's words, about Christine's warning, about his own helplessness against the demons that plagued him. He needed a distraction, something that would make him forget what a failure he was. At that moment, he thought for the first time about the mysterious woman from the nightclub, Nadira. Her name alone made his heart beat faster. Maybe it was time to call her. If you've ever wondered how quickly a successful life can turn into a nightmare, then subscribe to this channel for more shocking true crime cases that show no one is immune to the dark sides of human nature. Nadira Hassan was a masterpiece of deception. At first glance, she seemed like one of many young migrant women seeking their fortune in Germany. Intelligent, hardworking, a little shy, but full of hope for a better future. But behind this carefully constructed facade hid a woman with a dark past and even darker ambitions. Born in Damascus as the daughter of a wealthy family, Nadira had learned early that beauty and intelligence were powerful weapons. Her father, a successful businessman with connections to questionable circles, had taught her that life was a game and that only the unscrupulous won. When the war broke out in Syria, Nadira used the chaos to abscond to Germany with a considerable portion of the family fortune. Her parents believed she was dead, killed in a bombing. The truth was that she had staged her own death to begin a new life, a life in which she was accountable to no one. In Munich, she had posed as a translator and student, lived in a modest apartment in Giesing, and carefully maintained the image of a hard-working, integration-minded migrant. But her real income came from a completely different source. She specialized in seducing wealthy, lonely, middle-aged men and systematically fleecing them. Her method was perfected. She studied her victims for weeks before making first contact. She learned their weaknesses, their longings, their secret shame. Then she presented herself as exactly the woman these men needed: understanding, admiring, seemingly helpless yet fascinatingly intelligent. Dr. Florian Weber was her most ambitious project to date. For weeks she had observed him, studied his habits, analyzed his weaknesses. She knew about his gambling addiction, his broken marriage, his guilt toward his daughter. She knew he was desperately searching for someone who wouldn't judge him but admire him. On that September evening in the nightclub, she had set her trap perfectly. The book she was reading was no random detail. It was an Arabic poetry collection about love and loss, something romantic and intellectual at once. She had known that a man like Florian, who considered himself cultured and worldly, would find that interesting. "You're not like other men," she had said to him, a phrase she had used dozens of times because she knew every man wanted to believe he was something special. After that first evening, she had made Florian wait 3 days before getting in touch. Just long enough for him to worry she might have lost interest, but not so long that he gave up. When she finally called, she sounded a little out of breath, as if she had just come from university. "Sorry, I'm only getting in touch now," she said with her velvety voice. "I had exams, and then I had to work. As a translator, you know, sometimes work comes unexpectedly." Florian was immediately all fire and flame again. "No problem. I thought I might have bothered you." "Bothered?" She laughed softly. "You were the first man in a long time I could have a really interesting conversation with." They arranged to meet the next evening at a discreet restaurant in the old town. Nadira deliberately chose a place that was romantic but not too conspicuous. She didn't want Florian to feel like she was trying to impress him or wanted his money. The second date was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. Nadira told of her difficult flight from Syria, her gratitude to be allowed to live in Germany, her dreams of building a new existence here. She casually mentioned financial worries, not whining or demanding, but with the dignity of a proud woman who wanted to solve her problems herself. "Sometimes it's hard," she said quietly while playing with her wine glass. "The language, the culture, the bureaucracy, and then the people who look at you as if you're worth less just because you're from another country." Florian immediately felt like her protector. "I'm sorry about that," he said, placing his hand on hers. "Germany can be a hard country when you're foreign, but not all Germans are like that," she replied, looking deep into his eyes. "You, for example, you see me as a person, not as a foreigner." At the end of the evening, Florian invited her to his home. Nadira hesitated playfully. I'm not like other women you might know," she stammered. "For me, intimacy means something special." "For me too," Florian assured her, although that wasn't true. In recent years, he had had dozens of affairs, mostly with women whose names he quickly forgot again. But with Nadira, something was different. When they finally stood in his bedroom, when she slowly undressed while watching his eyes, Florian felt an intensity he hadn't experienced in a long time. What he didn't know, Nadira studied every one of his facial expressions, every reaction, stored everything for later use. She wasn't just physically with him, she was mapping his soul, searching for the weak points she would later exploit. "You're wonderful," Florian whispered after their first time. "You too," Nadira replied and stroked his chest. Inwardly, she smiled coldly. Phase 1 was successfully completed. The relationship between Florian and Nadira developed with an intensity that completely threw the experienced lawyer off course. What had begun as a simple affair transformed within a few weeks into an obsessive passion that threatened to take over his entire life. Nadira was a virtuoso of emotional manipulation. She knew exactly when she had to give herself to Florian and when she needed to create distance. After their first night together, she disappeared for 4 days, responding only sparsely to his messages. "I need time to think," she finally wrote to him. "What happened between us? It was beautiful, but also frightening. I'm afraid of getting too used to you." These feigned doubts only made Florian hungrier. He, who was used to always having the upper hand in negotiations, suddenly found himself in the role of the supplicant. He sent her flowers, invited her to the most expensive restaurants in the city, bought her small gifts, a silk scarf, a book of Rilke poems, an antique necklace. "You don't have to try to impress me with gifts," Nadira said as she examined the necklace. "I'm not like other women. Money and expensive things mean nothing to me." These words struck Florian's heart. After his divorce, he had mainly met women who were obviously interested in his wealth. Finally, he had found someone who valued him as a person. Meanwhile, Nadira was already analyzing his financial status thoroughly. She had found out that he owned a house in Bogenhausen, drove several luxury cars, and had accumulated considerable wealth. She also knew about his gambling debts, the regular large cash withdrawals, his unstable lifestyle. The second time they slept together, Nadira staged a small accident. As she was getting dressed, the seam of her dress allegedly tore. "Oh no," she sighed and examined the damage. "That was my only beautiful dress. I can't afford to buy a new one." Florian immediately offered to buy her a new dress. No, several. But Nadira refused. "I can't accept that. You already helped me so much. Make me feel valuable. I don't want you to think I'm taking advantage of you." Her feigned scruples only made her more desirable. Florian insisted on accompanying her shopping. At the luxury department store, Oberpollinger, Nadira deliberately chose modest pieces. A simple black dress, a discreet blouse, a simple skirt. "Are you sure you like that?" the saleswoman asked skeptically as she looked at Nadira's selection. "It's perfect," Nadira replied with a smile. "I'm a simple woman. I don't need fancy clothes." Florian was enchanted by her modesty. All other women he knew would have chosen the most expensive pieces on such an occasion. But Nadira seemed really different. What he didn't see was the brief look Nadira exchanged with the saleswoman, a look that revealed the two knew each other. The saleswoman was an old acquaintance from Nadira's previous projects. Later, she would discreetly inflate the bill by several thousand euros and split the difference with Nadira. The third time was different. Nadira came to him visibly upset. "What happened?" Florian asked with concern. "My sister, she's sick, in Damascus. She needs an operation, but the family has no money." Tears ran down Nadira's cheeks, real tears that she could produce through a technique she had learned from a theater director. "How much do you need?" Florian asked without hesitation. 5,000 euros, Nadira sobbed. "But I can't ask that of you. You've already done so much for me." "Nonsense," Florian said, and pulled her into his arms. "Family is the most important thing. I'll transfer the money tomorrow." "Really?" Nadira looked at him with large, grateful eyes. "I'll pay you back as soon as I can." "I don't want to hear about that," Florian said firmly. "You help the people you love." The word love hung in the air between them. It was the first time either of them had spoken it. "Do you love me?" Nadira whispered. "Yes," Florian replied without hesitation. "I love you." "I love you too," Nadira lied and kissed him passionately. That night they made love with an intensity that almost frightened Florian. Nadira was transformed, wilder, hungrier, insatiable. They made love 3 times, and each time it was as if she was sucking something out of him. The next morning, Florian transferred the 5,000 euros to an account Nadira had given him. He did it gladly, felt generous and important. Finally, he had someone to care for again. What he didn't know, there was no sick sister in Damascus. The money ended up in one of several accounts Nadira had opened under different names. It wasn't the first time she had used this story, and it wouldn't be the last. But for Nadira, Florian was more than just an ordinary victim. He was intelligent, successful, and had access to information that could be valuable to her contacts in the underworld. She decided to play the game slowly, to draw him step by step deeper into her web. The 4th time they made love in his office, late in the evening after all employees had gone. It was risky and exciting at the same time. "You make me do crazy things," Florian gasped afterward. "Maybe you need that," Nadira whispered and stroked his chest. "Maybe you've been the perfect lawyer for too long. Time to discover the wild man in you." These words would seal his fate. After 6 weeks of intense relationship, Nadira had Florian exactly where she wanted him, emotionally dependent, financially generous, and ready to take risks for her that he would normally never have taken. It was time for the next phase of her plan. The 5th time they met at her apartment in Giesing, Florian was surprised by the modesty of her furnishings. Used furniture, few personal items, Everything very Spartan. It only reinforced his image of her as a modest, authentic woman. "Sorry about the simple furnishings," Nadira said as she prepared tea. "I prefer to spend my money on more important things." "Like your sister," Florian said, and pulled her to him. "Exactly." Nadira smiled, but her eyes remained cold. The story about the sick sister had worked so well that she had decided to expand on it. While they were making love, Nadira casually mentioned that she was worried about her residence permit. "Sometimes I think they'll send me back," she whispered, lying on his chest. "To Syria, where the war is still raging." Florian stroked her hair. "That won't happen. Germany is a constitutional state. But the laws are getting stricter, and I'm afraid someone might tell the authorities something about me, something untrue." "What do you mean?" Florian asked, alarmed. Nadira sat up and looked at him with large, frightened eyes. "There's a man, Hassan al-Rashid. He's blackmailing me." "Blackmailing? With what?" "He claims I stole money in Damascus before I fled. It's not true, but he has forged documents. He threatens to send them to the police if I don't give him money." Florian sat up. His lawyer instincts awakened. "That's extortion. We'll go to the police." "No." Nadira grabbed his arm in panic. "You don't understand. As a refugee, no one believes me. They'll think I'm lying. And if the authorities see these forged papers..." "How much does he want?" 10,000 euros, Nadira whispered. "But I don't have the money, and I can't ask you for help again." Florian took her face in his hands. "You're not asking me for anything. I'm offering it to you. No one will blackmail the woman I love." What Florian didn't know, Hassan al-Rashid didn't exist. It was another building block in Nadira's complex web of lies. The 10,000 euros would flow directly to one of her accounts. But the story gave her something even more valuable than money. It made Florian her protector, her savior. The sixth time was characterized by Florian's new role as her protector. He not only transferred the 10,000 euros, but also began discreetly making inquiries about Nadira's alleged situation. He contacted colleagues who specialized in asylum law, inquired about possibilities to strengthen her position. "You do so much for me," Nadira said while lying naked in his bed. "How can I ever thank you?" "By staying with me," Florian replied and kissed her passionately. But Nadira had already begun to extract information from him. She asked seemingly casually about his most important clients, upcoming trials, confidential details. As an experienced attorney, she knew which information could be valuable in the wrong hands. "The construction entrepreneur trial must be very stressful for you," she said one evening. "How do you know about that?" Florian asked, surprised. "It was in the newspaper. You were in the photo." She stroked his chest. "Such an important, powerful man." Flattered, Florian told more than he should have. About weak points in the indictment, about witnesses who might change their testimony, about strategies his defense was pursuing. Nadira listened attentively and stored every detail. She had already made contact with people who would pay well for such information. The seventh time marked a turning point in their relationship. Nadira had manipulated Florian to the point where he was ready to cross boundaries for her that he never would have thought possible. They met at a discreet hotel in the city center. Nadira had booked the room and only sent him the number. When Florian arrived, he found her in black lace lingerie, candles illuminating the room. "You look tired," she said, and began loosening his tie. "Too much stress, too much work, you need relaxation." What followed was the most intense night of their time together so far. Nadira seemed to let all inhibitions fall, was wilder and more passionate than ever. But between moments of ecstasy, she asked targeted questions. "Tell me about your clients," she whispered in his ear. "You help so many people. That's admirable." "Not all of my clients can be helped," Florian gasped. "Not even this construction entrepreneur?" Florian hesitated for a moment. "Yes, him too. The evidence against him is thin, very thin." "You're so clever," Nadira purred. "How do you do it? How do you find the weak points?" Intoxicated by her admiration and the physical sensations, Florian told details he should never have revealed. Names of witnesses, internal prosecution strategies, weaknesses in the chain of evidence. Nadira smiled in the darkness. This information was worth gold to the right buyers. The next morning, Florian seemed confused and a little ashamed. "I talked too much last night," he murmured. "You talked to the woman you love," Nadira replied gently. "It's normal for lovers to share their secrets." But Florian instinctively felt something wasn't right. As an experienced lawyer, he had developed a sense for manipulation. For the first time since the beginning of their relationship, doubts arose. These doubts intensified when he met Dr. Jens Maurer at a restaurant a few days later. "You look terrible," Jens said without preamble. "When did you last really sleep?" "I'm in a relationship," Florian replied evasively. "Oh, really? With whom?" "With a wonderful woman, Nadira. She's different from all the others." Jens frowned. "Florian, you've known me for 20 years. I've never seen you so obsessed with a woman. That's not healthy. You don't know her. Then introduce her to me. Why does she keep you secret from your friends?" This question hit Florian unprepared. In fact, Nadira had always found excuses when he suggested introducing her to his friends or family. "She's shy," he said weakly. "Or she has something to hide," Jens countered. "Florian, I'm seriously worried about you. You're neglecting your work, your daughter, your friends. That's not the man I know." These words haunted Florian for the next few days. He began observing Nadira more carefully, watching for contradictions in her stories. And he found them. Once she told him she had been an only child. Another time she casually mentioned her 3 siblings. When he confronted her about it, she became angry. "You don't trust me," she accused him. "After everything we've been through together, you doubt me." "I want to trust you," Florian said. "But you tell me contradictory things." "My past is complicated," Nadira replied with tears in her eyes. "Sometimes I try to suppress the painful memories. Forgive me if I sound confused doing so." Her tears moved Florian, but a small doubt remained. When they made love the 8th time, he was less devoted than usual, more attentive, more analytical. Nadira immediately sensed the change. After making love, she lay in his arms and said quietly, "You're different today, more distant." "I'm tired," Florian lied. "Or you doubt me." Her voice was vulnerable, but her eyes were watchful. "Someone has planted doubts in your mind." "No one has planted anything in my mind." "Yes, I feel it. You've talked to someone about me. That friend, maybe? Jens?" Florian remained silent, but his reaction gave everything away. "He doesn't understand us," Nadira continued. "He's jealous of our happiness. There are always people like that. Jens isn't jealous. He's worried." "Worried?" Nadira sat up, her eyes flashing dangerously. "What is he worried about?" He thinks you might be manipulating me." Nadira stared at him for a long time. Then, to Florian's surprise, she began to laugh. It was a cold, humorless laugh. "Manipulating?" she repeated. "I, the poor refugee woman, am manipulating the powerful German lawyer?" He didn't say it like that, but that's what he meant. Nadira stood up and began getting dressed. "You know what, Florian? Maybe your friend is right. Maybe I really am dangerous for you. I don't mean it like that." "Yes, you do," she interrupted him. "Deep in your heart, you believe that a woman like me can only be with a man like you because of money." "Nadira, please." She turned to him, and for the first time, Florian saw something in her eyes that made him shiver. Something hard, calculating. "You want to know who I really am?" she asked quietly. "You want to know what I really want?" Florian nodded, although he suddenly feared the answer. "Then let's end the game," Nadira said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's see how far you're willing to go for the woman you love." The 9th time was to change everything. Nadira had decided it was time to drop her masks and show Florian who he was really dealing with. But she would do it her way. Calculating, manipulative, destructive. She invited him to her home, but this time the apartment was changed. The Spartan furnishings had disappeared, replaced by luxurious furniture, expensive artworks, designer pieces. In the corner stood a safe that Florian had never seen before. "Surprised?" Nadira asked when she noticed his confused look. What happened here?" "I stopped lying," she replied, and poured herself an expensive whiskey, not the cheap tea she normally drank. Florian looked around as if he were entering a stranger's room for the first time. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't understand. You were so busy being the big savior that you never really looked." Nadira sat in a leather armchair that definitely didn't belong to a poor student. "Who are you?" Florian asked in a voice he didn't recognize himself. "I am Nadira Hassan. That's my real name. But I'm not a poor refugee woman who needs your help." She sipped her whiskey. "I'm a businesswoman." "What kind of businesswoman?" Nadira smiled coldly. "I deal in information. I collect secrets. I sell them to the highest bidders." Florian felt the blood drain from his face. "The information about my clients was very valuable. especially about the construction entrepreneur trial. There are people who paid a lot of money to know which witnesses might waver. You used me, Florian whispered, like all the others too. Nadira stood up and went to him. The difference is that you let yourself be used voluntarily. You wanted so badly to be the hero, the savior of the poor foreign woman. Florian staggered backward. The sick sister, the blackmailer, made up. Every single story was made up. She stroked his cheek, and he pulled back. But your money was real. 25,000 euros in total. A nice fee for 10 weeks of work. 10 weeks of work, Florian repeated, stunned. Oh, Florian, you really thought I had fallen in love with you? She laughed, and the sound was like glass shards. You're 45, divorced, addicted to gambling, and emotionally unstable. What would a woman like me want with a man like you? The words hit Florian harder than physical blows. He sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. Why are you telling me this? He asked, broken. Because our business isn't finished yet. Nadira's voice became businesslike. I need something from you, something important. I'm not giving you anything more. Oh, yes, you will. She went to the safe and took out a folder. Do you remember our most intimate moments? I documented them all. She opened the folder and showed him photos. Photos of him naked, in compromising positions. His face was clearly recognizable. These pictures will be very interesting for your ex-wife, Nadira said calmly, and for your daughter, and for the bar association. You monster, Florian gasped. I'm realistic. You can make these photos disappear, but it will cost you something. How much money do you want? No money. Information. I need the files from the corruption trial. All documents about witnesses, evidence, strategies. I can't do that. That would be breach of confidentiality. It already was all along, Nadira replied coldly. The only difference is that now you're doing it consciously. Florian stared at her, this woman he had thought he loved, who had systematically destroyed him. You have a choice, she continued. Either you bring me the files tomorrow, or these photos will become very public. Your career will be ruined. Your relationship with your daughter destroyed. And if I give you the files, then the photos disappear forever, and you'll never see me again. Florian was silent for a long time. Then he asked quietly, was any of it real? Did we ever share a genuine moment? Nadira looked at him for a moment. For a heartbeat, something like regret seemed to flicker in her eyes. You were a better lover than most, she finally said. But no, none of it was real. When Florian left her apartment, he was a broken man. The woman he had loved had never existed. Instead, he had fallen in love with a phantom, a projection of his own longings. On the drive home, he thought about Sabine, his destroyed career, the life he had built, and that now lay in ruins. He also thought about the files in his safe, the only thing standing between him and complete destruction. The 9th time was the last time he had seen the Nadira he thought he knew. Next time, he would be dealing with a monster. The night after the revelation was the longest in Florian's life. He sat in his study, the corruption trial files before him, wrestling with a decision that would change his life forever. Whatever he did, he would lose. The photos Nadira had shown him were devastating. They showed him not only naked and in compromising positions, but also in moments of apparent ecstasy. If these images became public, his career would be over. The bar association would revoke his license, his clients would drop him, and worst of all, Sabine would despise him. Around 4 in the morning, he picked up the phone and called Dr. Jens Maurer. Florian, it's 4 in the morning. What happened? Jens, I need your help. It's worse than you thought. Jens came to Florian's house within an hour. What he found there shook him. His friend was a shadow of himself, completely destroyed, on the brink of a nervous breakdown. Tell me everything, Jens said, and sat beside him. Florian recounted the whole story. The seduction, the lies, the blackmailed secrets, the photos. With every word, he sank deeper into himself. My God, Florian, Jens whispered. You have to go to the police. With what? She didn't rape me. She seduced me. Everything I did voluntarily. She blackmailed you, after I had already revealed secrets. Jens, I violated my duty of confidentiality. If this comes out, I'm finished. Jens was silent for a long time. Then he said, You're not giving her the files. Then she publishes the photos. Then she publishes them. But you won't become a traitor to your clients. My career is over either way, Florian said bitterly. At least I could spare Sabine the humiliation. And what about the other victims? Do you think she'll stop after she's finished with you? This question caught Florian off guard. In his self-pity, he hadn't thought that there might be other victims. There has to be another way, Jens said thoughtfully. Which one? We set a trap for her. They spent the entire next day planning. Jens, who as a lawyer himself had experience with difficult negotiations, developed a strategy. They would seemingly hand over the files to Nadira, but record how she blackmailed him. With these recordings, they could go to the police. This is risky, Jens warned. If she becomes suspicious, I have no other choice, Florian replied. On the evening of the agreed meeting, it would be their 10th and final time together. Florian came to Nadira's apartment. Under his shirt, he wore a tiny camera that Jens had organized. Nadira received him in a red dress, beautiful and cold as an ice flower. Do you have the files? Florian held up a folder. Here they are. Good. She went to the safe and took out the folder with the photos. Then we can conclude our business. First, I want to see you destroy the photos. Nadira smiled. You don't trust me? After everything we've shared together? After everything you've done to me, I don't trust you with anything. Very understandable. She opened the folder and showed him the photos again. These pictures show you in very compromising situations. What would your 15-year-old daughter think if she saw her father like this? You're disgusting, Florian said, but his voice trembled. I'm practical. You give me the files. I destroy the photos. A fair trade. The photos first. Nadira shrugged and went to the fireplace. As you wish, but instead of burning the photos, she only held them over the flames. The files, she demanded. Florian hesitated for a moment, then handed her the folder. At that moment, something unexpected happened. Nadira laughed. You really thought I would destroy the photos? She asked, amused. Florian, you disappoint me. For a lawyer, you're surprisingly naive. We had a deal. Deals can be broken. You should know that as a lawyer. She set the photos aside. These pictures are my life insurance. As long as I have them, you'll never testify against me. Florian felt panic rising within him. You can't blackmail me forever. I can try, but don't worry. I'll be discreet. Maybe I'll just need a small favor from you every few months. What favors? Information about other trials. Contacts with important people. You know many powerful people. Florian, that's valuable. Florian understood that he had not only destroyed himself, but that she wanted to make him a permanent tool of her criminal machinations. Never, he said, with a determination that surprised even himself. Oh yes, Nadira replied coldly. You have no choice. It was at this moment that Florian made a decision that surprised even himself. He reached for a heavy crystal ashtray on the table. Florian, what are you doing? I'm ending this. You won't do anything. You're too weak, too cowardly. But she had misjudged him. A man who had already lost everything had nothing left to lose. What happened in the next few minutes in Nadira's apartment would haunt Florian for the rest of his life. The small camera under his shirt recorded everything. His desperation, her coldness, and finally the moment when a victim became a perpetrator. You won't do anything, Nadira repeated with ice-cold voice. You're too weak, too cowardly. You're a loser, Florian, a pathetic little man who let himself be manipulated by a woman. These words hit Florian like whiplashes. All his weaknesses, all his failures as a father, as a husband, as a human being, they all seemed to crash down on him in this moment. I trusted you, he whispered, still holding the ashtray. Trust is for the weak, Nadira replied and turned away, as if he were no threat. Intelligent people trust no one. That was her mistake. She underestimated the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose. Florian raised the heavy crystal ashtray. His hand trembled, but his resolve had become iron. You will destroy the photos. Now. Nadira turned around, and for the first time he saw genuine surprise in her eyes. You want to threaten me? With an ashtray? I'm not threatening. I'm telling you what's going to happen. You won't touch me, Nadira said. But her voice sounded less certain than before. You're not a violent person. You're a lawyer, a civilized man. Civilized men have limits, Florian replied. You've crossed mine. Nadira took a step toward him, and Florian saw something in her eyes he had never seen before. Respect. For the first time since the beginning of their relationship, she saw him not as a victim but as a threat. Florian, she said, and her voice became softer, more manipulative. You love me. You said so yourself. People who love each other don't hurt each other. You never loved me, he replied bitterly. So don't tell me about love, but you still love me. I see it in your eyes. That was the cruelest part. She was right. Despite everything she had done to him, despite her lies and manipulations, Florian still felt something for the woman he had thought he loved. It was a perverse remnant of affection for a person who had never existed. The photos, he repeated. And if I destroy them, what then? You go to the police, tell them everything. I'll be arrested. That's your problem. No, that's our problem. Nadira smiled coldly. Because even if you destroy me, the information you gave me remains. It's already been sold. Your clients will learn that their lawyer betrayed them. Florian felt his last hope fade. Even if he stopped Nadira, the damage was already done. His career was over, his reputation destroyed. You destroyed everything, he whispered. I only did what you enabled me to do, Nadira replied. You were so desperate for love, so ready to sacrifice everything. You did that yourself. It was this last cruelty that drove Florian over the edge. The ashtray flew from his hand, not aimed, not planned, but in a moment of pure desperation and rage. The heavy crystal hit Nadira in the temple. She staggered, fell against the table, hit her head on the edge. The sound was terrible, dull, and final. Florian stood there, his arms still raised, staring at Nadira's motionless body. Blood slowly seeped from under her head. Nadira? He whispered. She didn't answer. He knelt beside her, searched for a pulse. There was none. Her eyes stared into emptiness, pupils dilated and unresponsive. Oh God, Florian murmured. Oh my God. Reality hit him with full force. He had killed a human being. The woman he had loved and hated lay dead before him. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone, dialed emergency services. Police and ambulance, he said in a voice he didn't recognize. I've killed someone. While waiting for the police, Florian sat beside Nadira's corpse and contemplated the ruins of his life. The photos still lay on the table, his secret documents beside them. The small camera under his shirt had recorded everything, his desperation, her extortion, the deadly blow. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Inspector Claudia Stein was an experienced investigator who had seen many strange cases in her 20 years of service. But when she entered the apartment in Giesing and found the collapsed man next to the corpse, she immediately knew this was no ordinary murder case. Dr. Florian Weber sat on a chair next to the sofa, his hands covering his face, repeating over and over, I killed her. I killed her. The forensics team immediately began their work. The scene was strange. No signs of a struggle, just a woman with a severe head injury and a man collapsed with guilt. Dr. Weber, Inspector Stein said calmly, I have to arrest you. You have the right to remain silent. I don't want to remain silent, Florian interrupted her. I want to tell everything. Everything. In the interrogation room at police headquarters, Florian began telling his story. For 3 hours he spoke, interrupted only by occasional questions from the investigators. He told of the seduction, the blackmail, the stolen secrets, the final showdown. You claim the victim was blackmailing you, Inspector Stein said. She didn't just blackmail me. She systematically destroyed me. Florian looked at his cuffed hands. But that doesn't justify what I did. Dr. Weber, you said you had a camera with you? Florian nodded and pointed to his shirt. Here, my friend Jens had organized it. We wanted to prove she was blackmailing me. The small camera was secured. What it contained would completely change the case. The video showed everything. Nadira's cold-blooded extortion, her threats, her contempt for Florian. It also showed the moment of desperation, the unplanned, impulsive, deadly blow. But the video revealed something else. When the technicians analyzed it, they discovered additional evidence in the background. Documents on Nadira's desk that indicated an entire network of criminal activities. This is bigger than just blackmail, Inspector Stein told her team. This woman was involved in organized crime. The search of Nadira's apartment brought shocking revelations. In her computer and safe, investigators found dossier on 12 other men, all showing similar patterns to Florian, compromising photos and videos of several victims, transfer receipts totaling over €500,000, contacts with an international organization, specializing in economic espionage. She wasn't just a blackmailer, Inspector Stein reported to her superior. She was part of a larger network. Dr. Weber was just one of many victims. Further investigations revealed Nadira's true identity. She was indeed from Syria, but not as a poor refugee woman. She came from a wealthy family with connections to criminal organizations. She hadn't fled to Germany but had been sent to build a spy network there. "My God," Dr. Jens Maurer whispered when he learned the findings. Florian had fallen into the net of a professional. The other victims were contacted. A judge in Hamburg, a construction entrepreneur in Frankfurt, a politician in Berlin, all told similar stories. Nadira had seduced, exploited, and blackmailed them all. Dr. Weber, Inspector Stein, said during another interrogation, "You must understand that you weren't just victims. You also stumbled upon an international spy network. That doesn't make it better," Florian replied quietly. "I killed a human being. You acted in a moment of desperation. The court will consider that." Florian's lawyer, ironically, he now had to find a defender for himself, argued for manslaughter in emotional distress. The video clearly proved it wasn't premeditated murder, but an impulsive act of a desperate man. But Florian's greatest concern wasn't his legal situation, but his daughter Sabine. The conversation with her was the hardest of his life. She came to the prison, 15 years old and completely confused by the events. "Dad, I don't understand any of this," she said and cried. "Neither do I, sweetheart," Florian replied. "I made terrible mistakes. I hurt someone, and now she's dead. But she was evil, wasn't she? The police say she did things to you. That doesn't justify what I did," Florian said firmly. "Nothing justifies taking someone's life." "Do you still love me?" Sabine asked in a quiet voice. Florian took her hands through the security glass. "You're the only thing in my life that still makes sense. I love you more than anything in the world." "Then fight," she said with surprising determination. "Fight to come back to me." The trial lasted 4 months. The media reported extensively on the blackmail murder and the international spy network that had been uncovered through Florian's tragic act. The court was lenient. Given the extreme psychological stress, systematic manipulation, and non-premeditated nature of the act, Florian was sentenced to 5 years imprisonment for manslaughter. "Dr. Weber," the judge said during sentencing, "you were undoubtedly the victim of an unscrupulous criminal. That doesn't excuse your act, but it explains it. The court hopes you will use the time to rebuild your life." 3 years later, Florian was released early for good behavior. Nadira's network had been completely dismantled. Dozens of other victims had found justice. Today, 2 years after his release from prison, Dr. Florian Weber lives a different life. He lost his license to practice law, but he found a new calling. He works for an organization that helps victims of romance, scams, and blackmail. "I know the signs," he says in an interview. "I know what it feels like to be manipulated, and I know how quickly one can spiral into desperation." His relationship with Sabine, now 19 and a student, has slowly recovered. She visits him regularly in his modest Munich apartment. "Dad is not the same person anymore," she says. "He's become calmer, more honest, even with himself. Florian hasn't had a relationship since his release. I have to learn to trust again first," he says. "Others, but especially myself." He overcame his gambling addiction with professional help. The nights he used to spend in casinos, he now uses for phone calls with desperate victims of online fraud. "Every call reminds me what happens when you lose control," he explains, "but also that there's always a way back if you're willing to accept the truth." Dr. Jens Maurer is still his best friend. Florian paid for his mistakes, he says, but he also learned from them. In a way, he's a better person today than before the whole tragedy. Inspector Claudia Stein, who now heads a special unit against international romance scammers, occasionally works with Florian. He has a unique insight into the psychology of both perpetrators and victims, she says. His experiences have already helped dozens of other people. No one visits Nadira Hassan's grave in Munich's North Cemetery. Her family in Syria still believes she died in a bombing. Florian was there once, shortly after his release. "I haven't forgiven her," he says, "but I don't hate her anymore either. She was a product of her circumstances, just as I was a product of mine." The 10 intimate encounters between Florian and Nadira changed both their lives forever. For her, it ended fatally. For him, it was a turning point that destroyed and recreated him. "People ask me if I regret it," Florian says in his modest office where he helps fraud victims. "Of course I regret it, every single day, but something meaningful has emerged from this regret. I can help others because I went through hell myself." On the wall hangs a photo of him and Sabine at her wedding last year. Florian walked her down the aisle. a man who had almost lost everything but won back the most important thing, his daughter's love and respect for himself. Life gives everyone a second chance, he says in conclusion. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it. Dr. Florian Weber took his chance, and although the price was high, a life, a career, years in prison, he found something he had lacked before, inner peace and true purpose in life. The story of Florian and Nadira is over, but the lesson from it lives on, in every person who faces similar decisions, and in the hope that recognition and remorse can lead to healing and forgiveness.